Hey, what's up guys, aarava here, and welcome back to a brand new video here today, and we are talking about next year's F1 game once again, F1 2021, and future F1 games, and having finished 4 seasons now of My Team Career Mode on the current 2020 game, I think I've got a good understanding of how the game kind of works, how long-term the game plays out, after multiple seasons, not just the kind of first one, which is not really a great indication of how the long-term lifespan of the game is, and how it is to play well into the game cycle, halfway through into the game cycle year on year. So following finishing 4 seasons, I've got 6 simple, very simple, I think, in my opinion, ideas and fixes that can be brought to the F1 game for not only next year's game, but future F1 games, depending on, which ones can be, put in, essentially, because I don't know, some of these are simple, yet maybe ones that Codemasters simply aren't willing to do for next year's game, but I think they're quite simple things, small little options that can really change the long-term plan of this game after, I would say, 3 seasons. Diving into number 1 of these ideas and fixes is adding a 3-tier option for player random mechanical failures, or just random DNFs for the player. Much like we have a 3-tier system for the damage in the game, we have off, reduced, full, actually 4 technically, because we have off, reduced, full, and then simulation. I think having 3 tiers for random player failures and DNFs for the races in your career mode, in My Team, or even driver career mode, is a really good way to level the playing field, I feel, the AI, because after now multiple seasons, not just in this game, this is actually a problem on all the F1 games, really, is the AI are susceptible to random failures, which is good, because obviously, it happens in real life. You have a random engine failure, it could change and swing the way a championship goes, or the way your season is going, or a race is going, but the player is never able to get that, ever. You have to induce a failure on yourself if you were to take in worn parts by mistake, or you worn them out so much during the race or whatever to get to 80% or 90 or 100 to actually have a DNF because of your engine failing. You can never get a random one, because that random number generation coding in the background that gives that failure to AI, when we hear on the radio mechanical failure for your teammate or for this person, they're going to be slow. You can never get that in your cockpit, and I feel like they need to give us the option. Those of us who are hardcore players that don't mind that are going to accept that, that's what happens in real life. Sometimes you just got to firm it and suck it up, even if it happens on the very last lap of an epic race. You've had a really good job and you have a failure. That's hard luck. It sometimes happens, and you can't really do anything to avoid it. So having 3 tiers of, having that completely off, having a bit more of a reduced manner, so maybe it only happens to you maybe possibly once in a season or never, and then kind of having a more realistic look at it, so maybe potentially it can happen 2 times to you in a season, or 3, or maybe it takes into account what your engine reliability department is looking like, what the reliability upgrades you've done, takes that into account, then calculates the probability of you having a failure in this race, and you could still get away with not having a single failure in the season, but there's that chance that you could get multiple, if not just 1 or 2, during the course of a season, and it just levels the playing field versus AI, because I feel I haven't had it personally for me in this year's game on My Team, but in the past I've definitely gained too big of an advantage on championship rivals or just other people, basically, by having them having failures and me obviously never having one as a player. So I think that can make a massive difference to the balancing act versus AI, especially when we get to seasons kind of 2 and beyond, where reliability is not much of an issue for the player at all anyway, in terms of the worn engine parts. Number 2, now continuing on with the theme of giving you more options in the main menus to kind of actually have the settings of the race rather than actual anything to do with the actual race itself, having slider options for the driver market volatility. So having a little setting in the main menu that kind of determines how volatile the driver market is, because at the moment it is very, very dull. I've said this in a tweet before publicly, added them. I don't know if they're going to take into account ever, so that's why maybe it's good for you guys to also chime in as well and let them know that you agree, but I personally, you might disagree, but I personally think the driver market, the movement between drivers, it's not enough. It's a game, it's not real life. Let's not have it as boring as real life sometimes, and a lot of the time is in F1 with the driver market moves. I want to see a lot of movement. I want to see as much movement as we maybe see on other sports games like FIFA, where you get ridiculous transfers between football players. It'd be great to see drivers swapping like that, and if you don't like it, just move it down the slider. Give us that option of a 0 to 100 volatility, like I said, and you can just choose how much of a madness you want in the driver market. They had it in a really sweet spot, I felt, when they first launched driver transfers in F1 2019 at the very start. Then it was about, I would say, 2 months had gone by into F1 2019's game cycle, and they patched in the driver market. They did a patch, and they actually said that they've reduced the amount of transfers, or the craziness, I guess, mid-season especially, and at the end of the season. And since then, they've kept it at the kind of same level. And on this year's game, it's kind of worse in a way, because you've got that kind of whole thing of you signing drivers as a driver manager of your team. It now kind of is basically just a domino effect. All the transfers happen because of the transfer you do. I got very lucky in Season 1 to Season 2 where I signed Sainz, and that created a massive domino effect of 8 transfers. But since then, I've only had a maximum of 2 transfers a season. Some of you have tweeted me saying you're only getting 1 transfer, which is maybe potentially your own one, or just 1. And also the drivers that are retiring, and other career mode saves you've seen of YouTubers or your friends or whatever, with Raikkonen retiring or Vettel retiring or Hamilton retiring, you're not getting any of those retirements. And so you could maybe get just very unlucky and get a very bland career mode save where nothing is really happening in the driver market. So give us that option again. Giving players more options is not a bad thing. I know in some cases having too many options is overcomplicating it, but in this case, I think giving you the options, if you're a more kind of realism kind of player, you want to have a very realistic to real life kind of experience of career, you maybe don't want crazy transfers, that's fine. But for someone like me, if I'm going to be playing this game well into, it looks like in this game I'll probably be playing this well into Season 6 to 7 plus, I want to see bonkers transfers. I want to get to like Season 8 and have the entire kind of top 6 in the top 3 teams, whoever they are. I want, very random drivers in there, drivers you're not used to make it exciting, because we get enough of that in real life where it's constantly Hamilton, Leclerc, Verstappen, those big household names. We've had enough of that in real life. You don't need it constantly in the game. At the start, Season 1 into 2, fair enough. But after that, I feel like there definitely needs to be way more just bonkers market switches with the driver. Number 3 is going to be building upon the custom calendar and kind of fixing the kind of issue we have of not being able to change the track order. I've said this before, and I'll say it again, basically, they need to allow us to change that order, but also just let us fully customize the season. If we want a 12 race calendar, let us do that. If we want specifically a 19 race calendar or a 21, let us do that. Right now, you've got obviously the full one, 22, 16, and then 10. Just give us a full customization option. Maybe, obviously a minimum of 10 races have to go through. So from 10, again, just give us a sliding option of 10, and it's a slider that goes up to maximum of 22, obviously the circuits we have. Or on top of that will be even more bonkers. They'll never do it. This is more of a pipeline dream. But obviously if they ever were able to add other extra circuits that F1 has now gone to in F1 2020, if you're able to swap in some of those and you're able to actually have a bigger calendar than what they have in real life, that would be a madness. Obviously that's a bit more of a dream kind of thing, but a realistic kind of option would be just letting us have a bit more full customization of that calendar, so you can switch it up, you can change the order and just keep it fresh, so every season is a little bit different, a little bit new. Number 4 is going to be having a look and kind of fixing and tweaking the rules regulation reset and kind of coding and when that springs up, because right now your regulation, you can get a reset, obviously that may reset up to all departments if you're very unlucky. Most of the time it's probably 2 departments, so you like, for example, aero and engine, or engine or durability. But at the moment, I'm kind of noticing, at least in my career, it seems like it's not happening as often. Obviously maybe maybe there's going to be a season where it doesn't happen, so from one season to another the rules are stable, but I think more needs to be done from the game underneath in the coding to kind of look at where the field spread is at, because I feel like if the game sees that most of the teams are in the kind of final 2/10 of their maximum R&D. So what I mean by that is that 8/10 of their 80% of their entire R&D tree, I'm talking all 3 departments of performance and the durability, if 80% of that is all filled nearly, and you've got like 5 teams in the top standings that are 80% filled of their R&D trees, I think the game needs to look at that coding and think, okay, that's getting dangerously close to being very bland now, because those AI teams won't be able to improve whatsoever very soon once they complete that extra 20%. So let's spring a regulation change now and do quite a big one of 3 different departments of like durability and 2 of the performance ones to really reset that and shake things up to make sure that you don't get a situation where I've seen some of you guys tweet me where you've maxed out your My Team car and now you've got a very boring perspective of you've also earned way too many R&D points. So if even there was a reset, you can repurchase everything. And so now you've pretty much got a dead career mode save because there's no challenge anymore. The AI aren't improving that much either because they're very, very close to their kind of ends of trees. And it basically kills off the game and could kill off the game for you if you're unlucky and it went that way, by season 3 or 4, as I think some of you have told me about before. So I think having a look at the tweak behind what's behind triggering that regulation change and maybe having a bit more of an aggressive coding to kind of see and look at the data of the AI and spring up a regulation change that's a lot more hard-hitting than it might be at the moment in what we've got currently in F1 2020. Number 5 is going to be HQ facilities decreasing in levels. Now, that is not maybe realistic to real life in a way, because once you build a factory, once you build a building, it's there, unless you went, actually properly bankrupt and really had to sell up, buildings and whatnot, you wouldn't really lose HQ facilities as an F1 team. You'd only ever build upon it. You'd maybe, close down, or, make staff, redundant or whatever, but you'll never really lose HQ facilities like that. But I think, again, you've got to remember, it's a game. As much as we all talk about being realistic, there are certain mechanics in this F1 game where you kind of have to lean on the game aspect more rather than the realism aspect, and these are one of those things with HQs. I feel like if you have an AI team or yourself performing bad enough in the standings where they don't earn as much money, I think HQ levels need to decrease. Now, I'll give an example. Mercedes in my career mode, for whatever reason, the game has just, decided that they're just going to get very unlucky a lot of the time and they're not going to perform at their best. The AI, I'm sure, are not at the highest ratings they usually are, especially for Hamilton. He's gotten so unlucky in my career that I'm sure he's kind of, been stat decreased over the course of the 2 seasons. But back to the original point, Mercedes have come, 5th or 6th in my championship for 2 seasons in a row. Now, that means they're going to get less prize money at the end of each of those seasons, but it doesn't matter because a team like Mercedes would have already had HQ level 3 for pretty much everything from the get-go of this career mode of mine. So I think there needs to be a case of maybe every year, those HQ facilities, you have to pay a big whopping bill to kind of sign them in a way for the next year, if that makes sense. Almost like a big mortgage you're paying on the HQ facilities every season. And so if an AI team or your team has decreased salary from their prize money for coming lower in the championship, maybe you get hit with a mortgage bill for an HQ facility that you can't afford. You can only afford the level 2 version of your aerodynamics facility. So you have to actually take a decrease in HQ and you have to go back down to level 2 into the new season and then re-earn money to maybe re-upgrade that facility. Obviously, with losing that level, you lose all the perks of the build time, the kind of fabrication and whatnot. So I think that's a good way to, again, naturally, as you go on through season to season, try and keep it a bit more level with the AI around and stops the AI stagnating and plateauing with R&D, because every time the regulation reset nerfs, Red Bull, Mercedes, if they lost aero and engine department, 1, they've got R&D points, and 2, all of them have got HQ level 3, so they can quickly, rapidly repurchase all those upgrades in the next season and catch up within half a season, which is not realistic, actually. So in the end, not being realistic with HQ decreases actually creates more realism in terms of if there ever was a case of a team getting the regulations wrong, they can't make up the time in half a season. We've seen this year, Ferrari, they're nowhere near making up the deficit they've lost this year in this whole season. It's going to take them a good 2 seasons, probably into the next regulation change, to even catch up back to where they were, in 2019 with what came into 2020. So I think in that kind of way, having a non-realistic HQ thing actually makes the rest of it quite realistic. And number 6, and I've definitely said this before, and this is a very, very simple fix. This is actually the easiest fix they can do out of all of these, is simply giving people the prize money before you have to re-sign your teammate and having a proper pre-season period where where you have all that money now from your prize money, and then you go and plan your season. You go out and you try and find the driver, you budget for the driver, you budget for your HQ upgrades, you budget for, your car and whatnot, but having a proper pre-season period, like most Sport Manager, they do it, if Cody's just look over at the game, get someone to play the game, and you can see the mechanism they've got is so much better. Get the prize money paid out after the last race, and then you sign your driver. I know technically in real life, obviously, you kind of sign drivers before the season's even over in many cases. But again, it's a game, and unfortunately, because the drivers don't have normal kind of contract periods and kind of salaries, and you don't really need to negotiate in the same way as you would do in real life for different things like that and HQ upgrades, it makes way more sense to have the game pay you the prize money straight after the last race, and then you think about re-signing the driver. So basically that just means when you re-sign the driver halfway through the season, which again is debatable if that's even an interesting thing to kind of do halfway through the year, but basically have the contract period, have it end at basically March in the in-game calendar rather than ending in December in the in-game calendar, which means basically as soon as you finish that last race of the season, be it Abu Dhabi or whatever, you've got the last race of the season, you've got a shortened calendar. Whatever that last race is, as soon as you finish it and you load out the screen from the race weekend, it puts you straight into the kind of main menu for my team and straight away tells you to re-sign your teammate or go and find a new teammate for next season, which is just a bit annoying because it means you have to actually pre-save for your teammates and therefore compromise maybe spending on HQ facilities straight off the bat at the end of the year, which again is not realistic because if you're planning a rebuild of a team or planning to build up a team, you want to kind of long-term plan that and get going before you even get to the winter period, basically. So that's a very easy one. I think that's just moving the goalpost, basically, of where you pay out that prize money and where you actually have to re-sign your teammate. But those are I think they're very, very simple ideas, and compared to other ideas we've had for the F1 game in the future for 2021 or future titles, I think compared to a lot of the kind of bonkers kind of pipeline dream ideas, those ones are all very simple. They're just kind of giving you menu options that tweak certain bits of the kind of behind the scenes coding, which I know is there for the AI. So it's just a case of giving it to the player in the case of things like the random failures, and then things like the driver transfers. Well, you've patched it before, so you can clearly control how volatile that market is because you've patched it and made it less so in the last game. So why not patch in a way for us to control that number value somewhere behind the scenes in the game? If you guys agree with most of those, then be sure to let me know, and if you disagree, then also do let me know, because I'm sure I know a few of you guys will disagree with some of the driver market ones potentially, but just obviously let me know, and let's have a little bit of debate in the comments below. If you guys did enjoy the video, enjoy the concept, then be sure to hit that like button. If you aren't around here, then do get subscribed for weekly Formula 1 content. I've been aarava. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.